Today is the 17th of Elul. Tomorrow is Chai Elul, the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. And it's also the 20th of September. And we're in chapter 20, which we've seen so far deals a lot with angels. So we have to say something about what do we want from all these angels? Because you and I don't. So the understanding is that angels are like the extension of creation. In other words, when the Torah describes God creating the world, it says God spoke. Okay, so he spoke. What did he speak? He said that there be light, that there be a firmament, that there be Tachei Haaretz, the earth should sprout greenery. But then there has to be something that's continuing, because we see the creation continues. It's not like a one-time event. And even if the total, there's this thing of conservation of energy. So even if the total amount of energy would be the same, and it's not. We kept talking about the first 19 chapters basically, that when we daven, when we pray, we're bringing down the new energy into reality. So it's not exactly that there's conservation of energy. There's no good way, I think, to measure it. You could say within a small system like the Earth, maybe that's what you seem to see. It's not even the Earth, because nobody can measure all the energy on the Earth. So you measure in a small system, which you can put in your lab. Nobody tried to prey on these systems. Like Rav Nachman used to say, when I see a place that has some kind of lack, there's something missing here, so I know it hasn't been prayed about enough. That prayer is what brings new energy into the system. Now this makes sense, because we're an open, all of us, anything that's alive is an open system. So we eat, and then we defecate, but we have to eat, we have to bring energy in, and that keeps us going. So where's this energy coming from? So the scientific imagination says it's constant, and we're just recycling. That's like regarding oil, right? That the scientific imagination says, no, there's only a set amount of oil in the world. I'm not sure it's true, because there's another argument that says, no, it's being created all the time. And it's true that there's a limit there also, but it's far different than the limit you imagine. It's not even close. Same thing was when we were children about the sun. So I don't know what you imagined. I imagined for a long time that there was a lot of wood on the sun, and it was being burnt. So I asked my parents, so what happens when the wood runs out? What do we do then?
You're an inquisitive.
So they didn't know what to answer, because my parents didn't understand fusion energy.
No, of course.
They had no idea. They had heard something, but you also have to understand, even if they were intelligent people, in the 1970s, the amount of information that they could gather from a newspaper, which is mostly about gossip, or as people say, avodah zara, gilui arayos, and shichus damim. That's what all the newspapers are about. So there's very little about fusion and why the energy from the sun comes from fusion. So I imagined something limited. But then slowly I began to understand that it's not limited at all. But then scientists do put a limit on. They say, okay, a white dwarf like our sun can that's not a white dwarf, but it'll end up being this type of a star. It can burn for another 4 billion years. So what does that mean for me and you? It means it's limitless. It doesn't really matter. In any case, even if you don't talk about adding energy into the system, you have to talk about what runs the system. What are the forces that run the system? So that is the understanding of what the angels are. And the hint at it is the word in Hebrew. In Hebrew we don't say an angel, supernal being. These don't mean anything. Malach is the word in Hebrew. And what does it mean? It comes from the word to do work. Melacha. Melacha means a form of toil, a form of work. So work is energy. You have to expend energy to do work. I mean, that's the basic tenet of physics. You can't get any work if you don't put out energy. So every angel has a name which is associated actually with its work.
Yeah, that's true.
Because that's what it means. Malach literally means a form of work. So you send a malach to do work. So Hashem is sending them out. How fast is He sending them out? He hasn't stopped talking. He keeps talking.
I'm sorry.
He hasn't stopped talking. Meaning,
He's still creating.
He's still creating them. He was talking in what we call the 6 days of creation, which has many meanings, and we've talked about this in the past. Is it like a limited amount of time? Is it just a cycle that repeats all the time? What is it? What is this exactly? In any case, beyond that, He's also constantly sending out forces to run the world, to make it move, to make it work. But there's a very interesting corollary to this. That on Shabbos, on Shabbat, we don't do 39 categories of work. We call them melachot, from the same root as malach. The sages in Shabbat, in Tractate Shabbat, what do they say? How do we get the 39? Where did we find 39 from? So first of all, the answer is because this is what there are. How do we know? It's like sort of like asking, how do you know there's 22 letters? Because when we started learning the Torah, there's 22 letters in it. What can I do? You're asking me how it came? I don't know. Hashem gave us the luchos. He gave us the tablets. There's 22 letters on them. There's one letter that's missing, right? It's only in the second pair of tablets, the tet. There's no tet there. In any case, so where's this from? So they ask the question. They want to know. Inquisitive minds want to know. So where did he get 39 categories of work? So one person says, makes a lot of sense, that these are the categories of work that go into making bread. But what's the problem? It doesn't cover all 39. It covers a lot, but not all 39. I think it's 31 or 32. Then you're left with 6, 7 more, 7, 8 more that you need to cover from somewhere else. Where do they get that? So they say it's for making a garment. So there's bread and the garment. So all the work categories that go into making bread, all the work categories that make into making a garment, add up to 39.
Where is this said?
The 7th chapter, Klal Gadol.
Where in
Shabbos, 7th chapter, is all about what are the 39 categories of
But I
work.
thought it was Rishut that we learned it out from the Malacha in
And then they come and say, so why are you adding suddenly garments? So because in the Mishkan they also had to make garments. They had to dye some of the fabrics.
I went through it. Yeah, okay.
That's in the Gemara. So we have to cover everything that was done in the Mishkan. So that's why we have both bread. They made bread.
I see. But we learned it out from bread, actually.
Bread, because that's what makes sense. Because what kind of work are you talking about? Man needs to go out into the field to get his bread, but then he also has to wear something. But that was all done in the Mishkan. So we have but then there's a different approach to this, which is let's learn this in another way. Let's count how many times the word melacha, work, appears in the Pentateuch. And they say, surprisingly, there's 39 times. We counted and there's 39. But then right away the Gemara already asks, but there's more than 39. We also counted. I mean, we got this by tradition, there's 39, but we also know how to count. And what can we do? We came up with more. How many more? That's also a question. So the Gemara goes through a discussion. This one doesn't count because it's this one doesn't count because it's that. In the end, it's 39. Trust me, it's 39. You said, I don't know. It's a tradition that. But there's something very interesting that, to the best of my knowledge, nobody has ever said. It was said the first time from Rav Ginsburg. First time anybody said this. He said, Melacha, you're right, there's more than 39. But there's a different word, which is related, that if you count it, you'll get it to exactly 39. Which word? Malach. If you count how many malachim, how many times is the word malach, meaning supernal being, an angel, a messenger of God's work, how many times has that word appeared in the Torah? You'll come up with 39. Exactly. No ifs, buts, and ands. That's what it is, 39. So this is a corollary to understand that when people called upon the angels, what they were trying to do was to get the world to act in the direction that they wanted. It was like they're calling upon these angels the way that Hashem calls upon these angels.
Where do we call upon angels?
They used to. There was a big tradition in Kabbalah to use angels' names. That we have a little bit left. Like we talked about Zvadia.
Okay.
We only use names that are also names of human beings. We don't even pronounce the names of because the Arizal said they have to stop with this.
Oh, there was
Why?
a trend.
But there was a very big tradition for hundreds of years, and not just hundreds, thousands of years, of using angels in order to catalyze some kind of effect that you wanted in the world.
Supposedly.
Right, that's what they were using. So now if you go to a Kabbalist a Sephardi Kabbalist who, on the one hand, knows what the Arizal said, on the other hand, he also has his traditions, so he may use angels. He may use it. It's probably mostly trickery, but still, could be that somebody knows something. In any case, there's dozens of books on this. It's not like something... And even a very super rationalist person like Reb Reuven Margoliot, who was probably one of the greatest bibliophile minds of the 20th century, the early 20th century. He passed away, I think, in 1960 or 65. He was in touch a lot with the Rebbe, who was the head librarian at the Torah Library of Tel Aviv. Actually, there's a big Torah library there, which is one of the most important ones in the world. And he was the head librarian.
Shabbos guy.
He was very
I have to get that later.
incredibly learned.
Really?
I mean, and the Rebbe used to ask him questions where things are. Yeah. He knew, it's unbelievable. The works that he wrote, nobody else can write today. I mean, he has a work comparing sources from all the Shas, all of the Gemara, the Talmud, and the Zohar, and all the Zoharic literature. So he goes back and forth, but it's not just from those two. When he goes into a topic, every single page of the Shas is covered, every single page. And he goes into discussions in the Rishonim and Achronim also of everything that was brought about this topic. It's an incredible book called Sharei Zohar. It's really a phenomenal, but that's just one of his encyclopedic work. He has many of them. So he also made an encyclopedia of angels. It's called Malachei Elyon. It's not very big, but it's not small.
Yeah.
It's a couple of hundred pages, and on every single angel he has everything that's been brought about it. So somebody asked, because this is interesting, somebody asked, what does it mean when an angel's name ends with on at the end? Like, we don't say these names, but one that we can say is Yeshurun. So Yeshurun ends with Vav Nun. So people, when they write it out, maybe they think it's like O-N or something, but it's really Vav Nun. So those are angels that come from the left side, and then you have angels that come from the right side, which usually end with Aleph Lamed, Kel. Then you have angels that end with Yud K. These are usually the more intellectual angels that connect to the intellect. And each one has a whole angelology explaining it. Like, and again, he just brings the sources. He cites them. He doesn't bring everything in himself, except for the more important ones where he actually wrote like whole essays about what they are. So, but the thing is to understand what people were trying to do. They were trying to tap into these forces. Now today you come to someone who say, what forces do you want to tap into? So they say, I need electricity, I need this, I need that. Those are the forces that interest people today. I'd like to cancel gravity, those forces. But there's a lot more forces in the world. It's just even connection between people. So there's a lot of angels that have to do with that. There's a connection between husband and wife that's connected, that's associated with an angel. There, actually, the name of the angel is completely different. It's not even the Aleph Lamed or Vav Nun, something entirely different. And people used to think in these terms. So today, it's more, because we're more intellectual, we're less mystical, and we have this prohibition from Rabbi Isaac Luria not to use angels' names anymore. So you still learn this, but you learn it to understand what this was about. Anyway, so that was just to sort of capture a little bit why this was important. But now, how does this bear on us? That if when a person is speaking, he can form the angel's name and, as it were, tap into that force or catalyze that force or whatever it is. So obviously, when we speak, when we are praying, we're not doing angels at all, but we are forming something. In the same way that God continues to form through His speech. So what God continues to form through His speech is the angels. What we form through our speech is the prayer.
Is a prayer.
Right. Yeah. And they are supposed to function similarly. one like the other. We learn from him, as it were. Okay. Where were we? That's the question. In any case, I'll start where I think we are. And every combination of letters from the troop was the root, and now you're taking the letters forming the name of an angel, and we said that there are an infinite number of troops, and within the troop there's a finite number of combinations of angels, as it were. The same thing is true also by our speech. There's an infinite number of roots of speech. What would that mean? That there's an infinite number of sources of speech, of emotion in the heart. It's like the heart is infinite in some way, I guess. And what you can form from that is limited, because in the end you're combining things. So there's a limited amount that you can combine, because not everything combines, not everything works together. And in the same way that the combinations that God makes creates an angel, the same thing happens by our speech. That we create the words that we speak, and they do work. That's the whole point. The words are doing work. And in fact, I wonder if there's a connection between word and work in English. I don't know. It sounds Wort and I don't know how you say work. In any case, and they're differentiated by their combinations of letters, by their names. And because of this, because each one is from a limited combination of letters, then they are also limited in what they can do and what they can perceive, each one of these angels. And our words, the same way. Because if there was some way for them to be limitless, then they would also completely burn themselves out immediately.
You say that they only have one task.
Right. They have only one task. That's one way of saying it.
Yes.
We don't really mean that. We don't mean really you can't. What do you mean? You mean that it's limited.
Yeah.
It's limited for one thing. והיינו לפי שמקבל הערה ממידות עליונות על ידי המלכות, ששם נעשה צמצום והתחלקות השפע לחלקים, ושיהיה השפע בגבול בתכלית, מה שאין כן המידות האצילות כמו שהם בעצמותם בחינת אינסוף. So now he says, what is this idea that the troop is infinite and the combinations are limited? So this is a way to understand this. It's not literal. We don't really mean that there's an infinite number of troops. What we mean to say is that the troops are the sources, let's turn to man, the sources of the emotions. They are limitless, but because when they come out through kingdom, through malchus, through our speech, that limits them. To say it another way, the simple way would be to say, the emotions I feel are much, much greater than what I can voice, what I can articulate. In my emotions I feel infinity. I can be infinitely angry, let's say, or infinitely in love, or infinitely all these things. My infinity is not true infinity. We'll explain this in a second. But the troop here is like the source of the emotion in my heart. But when I articulate it, words don't do it justice. Until we find in Tehillim, for instance, en mila bilshoni. I have no words. No words. I have no words to express what I'm feeling. In God's realm, the way we say this is that all the sfirot of the world of emanation of Atzilus are infinite in their essence. Kingdom is the one that limits them. The kingdom of Atzilus, the kingdom of emanation. So, what are we saying? We're saying that when God reveals His mercy really is infinite. He could have infinite mercy. But now, when He wants it to come into our world, remember we had the same discussion with why do we even need to have names of God? Why isn't God just infinite the way He is? Why don't we just refer to Him that way? Because we can't, it's ineffable, we don't get it. We can't express it. So when we express, we're doing what God Himself did. He created the sfirot. Here we mean the sfirot of the lower worlds. And they all go through kingdom. They have to go through kingdom which limits them so that there is a limited finite world. So when we say an emanation, the emotions, the chesed, gvura, tiferes, netzach, they're infinite. To come into our world, they have to come through some kind of limitation. Same thing by the angels' names. The origins, the troops, the roots, they're infinite. When you articulate it, there's a limited number of combinations. What we're saying is that it has to go through some kind of limiting process. And so we find on every single place we look, we find the same structure. The sources are infinite. To come down into our world, into our reality, they have to be limited in some way. So the same thing is true about us, and it's very clear about us. So we have a lot of emotion, and again, it can be the most positive emotion in the world. Famous story about with the Rebbe, the fifth Rebbe, when his only he had two sons. When his son, the Rebbe Rayatz, was a baby, so he passed by his crib and he wanted to kiss him, and then he decided a kiss is also an expression, but it's better than it's like a tkiya. It's like the shofar blowing. Why is a kiss more? Because you're not limiting. You're but still there is something there that's limiting. It's not words. So he decided that he won't give him a kiss. First of all, because it could be that it'll wake him up. Well, let's say it won't. He decided he'd write him a mimer. He'd write him an essay. And he'd give it to him when he was old enough to understand it. So imagine this. It's an unbelievable thing. I didn't realize it until a friend of mine who was a psychologist analyzed this story. He said, the natural love that a father has for his child, how do you hold it back? But more importantly, how do you then go? He was on his way to bed. He went back to his office and he wrote 3 pages of a mimer, of an essay on some Torah concept, some Hasidic essay. And here he took his emotions and he said, I can try to capture it in a kiss, but let me capture it in something much more articulated, much greater, much more expansive. And even though the kiss is laden with emotion, the child will never receive it. Right. And he said Shema. So even though I may give him the kiss, he'll never know. But if I turn this into an essay and I give this to him as a sign of my love for him, this he will have his whole life. It's a completely different level. It's an unbelievable act when you think about it. I mean, I'm sure he kissed him a lot. It wasn't the issue. But here at this moment, he said, I can transfer all of this infinite emotion that I have into something much more eternal. And we have that mimer also. We can actually, yeah. Okay, so we'll end with this. Good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom, and happy, joyous Chayal.